Hey, what's good, bros? Today, what I want to encourage you to do is to stop letting Christians, other Christians just like yourself, and stop letting church and just all that comes with it distract you from Christ. Now, to preface this, what I'm not trying to do is to get you to begin to demonize Christians in your mind and to demonize the church in your mind. The whole reason why your soul is resting easy right now is because God created a church through his son's blood that we are all benefiting from being a part of, and we'll continuously benefit from being a part of. I'm not trying to get you to demonize other Christians, because even the worst Christian you know has a purpose, and God is using them if they themselves are allowing themselves to be used. But what I do want to caution you against is falling into a place where you're so wrapped up in church and you're so wrapped up in other people and what they're saying and what they're doing and what they're telling you to do and telling you not to do, and all these things that's going on, to the point where you find yourself in the position where a lot of us find ourselves, where we become spiritually tapped out. We become spiritually jaded. We become very, very indifferent. We become very, very just lackadaisical in our approach to many things in life in general, because we've become so zapped when it comes to our spiritual energy. And I don't want that to be your story. I don't want that to be your problem. And I would like to help you with what I found is just so key and paramount. Honestly, if I was to tell you to do anything, I'd have you read all of Colossians. But the part that I'm going to focus on right now, or I'm going to, direct your eyes towards, is Colossians chapter 2 at verse 18. It says, "Take care that no one keeps defrauding you of your prize by delighting in humility in the worship of the angels, taking his stand on visions he has seen, inflated without cause by his fleshly mind." And then at 19 it says, "And not holding firmly to the head, from whom the entire body, being supplied and held together by the joints and ligaments, grows with growth which is from God." This is such an important verse because it highlights something very, very important. It highlights that even then in Colossae, like we see now, there's a lot of different thoughts. There's a lot of different voices. There's a lot of different philosophies. There's a lot of different trains of thought. And there's a lot of people, and I've even been there, a lot of us have been there at times, where we will dig our feet so deep into a certain train of thought, into a certain philosophy. I think even when we look at a lot of things that distract us now, we get distracted from Christ, because rather than digging our feet 10 toes deep into Christ, we're digging our feet 10 toes deep into an argument or a philosophy. But I'm bringing this to your attention because what I've noticed is that sometimes, not even sometimes, a lot of times, if we're not careful, we get lulled to sleep. I honestly think it's a trick of Satan, but we get lulled to sleep into what some people will call ritual, what some people will call tradition. I think that it is solely just a distraction. You could call it whatever you want, and everybody has their own, but we get lulled to sleep to the point where we forgot that Christ was intended to be of our day-to-day life, completely and separately apart, or completely and separate apart from worship, from the fellowship, from coming together. Not to mention, a lot of times we approach our walk of faith today with a very, very corporate mindset, when it was never meant to be corporate. It was meant to be communal. It was day to day, house to house. Acts chapter 2, Acts chapter 5. You see that this wasn't just something that we were coming together and doing on Sunday. What we sometimes fall into the trap of when we forget and we're not mindful of these distractions, we find ourselves in this position where we're beginning to we begin to attempt to find peace, and we begin to attempt to find spiritual growth. We begin to attempt to find personal growth, and we begin to attempt to find Christ and find God in the ritualistic, week by week, Sunday morning worship, contexty things, when he was never meant to be found there. We don't have those moments when we're praying to him by ourselves. We don't have those moments in study by ourselves. We don't have those moments of meditation by ourselves. Half of us don't even take a second to step back away from distractions and just things, social media, conversation, occupying our time, occupying our mind. We don't step away enough to the point where we allow ourselves to even truly sit and let what we've studied or what even we've been taught sink in and really take root. I think that is definitely a byproduct of life in the West, to the point where we're just running and zipping and trying to do so much all the time. But nonetheless, I'm bringing this to your attention, bro, because I need you to see that there is a game that's being played by the enemy that, if we're not careful, it will really take us out. There's so many today who have given up on their faith because they were not fixing their eyes on where the true supply of faith and power and comfort and growth. They allowed their eyes to be shifted from Christ himself, the giver of all things, to all these other things, all these other philosophies, all these other trains of thought. And so on today, I'm sharing this with you because a lot of times we don't talk about this either, but us being men of God, us being impactful men of God, to our families first and then the community around, a lot of times they're looking at us for their cues. A lot of times they're looking at us for the next thing to do, the next goal, the next milestone. Where are we going? What are we trying to do? How are we working for God? How are we working and moving throughout life? And if our eyes aren't zeroed in and focused intentionally, we cannot expect our eyes to be zeroed in and focused intentionally. If we're not protecting our vision and focusing it on Christ, even in the midst of the assembly, even in the midst of the church, even in the midst of our friend groups, even in the midst of these conversations and arguments that don't mean nothing to nobody, if we're not allowing our eyes to be focused directly on what Christ would have us focus on, which is him, his purpose, and what he has us to do, what he has set out for us to do, we'll consistently find ourselves in this tug of war. We'll consistently find ourselves in this spiritually disparate position, and we won't be able to find ourselves any way out of that unless we allow our eyes to be turned back to Christ. And so today on the Large and Logic podcast, I want you to take an inventory of how you've been spending your time this last week. I want you to take an inventory of how your last even worship experience was. And I want you to ask yourself, out of all these things I've been doing this past week, out of all this time I've spent, out of everything that took place in my last worship experience, how much of this actually brought my mind back to Christ, or focused or helped me center my mind more on Christ, and how much of it was just noise? And if you find yourself saying anything similar to what I'm talking about, then you definitely can be rested assured that this was sent from God, number one. And then number two, you can and should redirect to find yourself back on track. But y'all know how I be. I'm not trying to belabor it. I'm not trying to hold y'all up. I just wanted to really deposit this to you and encourage you that you have everything you need to be able to be aligned and get the result that you're trying to get, which is being close to Christ and walking in purpose and power. But it all starts with you fixing your eyes and not letting all this other stuff distract you. But without further ado, my name is Avery Taylor. You are tuned into the Larger Than Logic podcast, and I am so glad that you have allowed me to be a part of your journey.